Yeah. Hey guys, today we have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Wanda Skowronska, who is a Catholic psychologist and author. Dr. Wanda, welcome today. Good to see you.
Hi, Luigi. Thank you for having me.
That's
Lovely
right.
to be here.
That's right. It's our pleasure. Thank you for having the time to speak with us. Because our viewers may not know who you are, can you please tell us about your upbringing?
Okay. Don't know where to begin, but yeah, I spent my first 5 years in Bunagilla, which is a migrant camp down on the border of Victoria and New South Wales. My parents were refugees after World War II. In fact, all my family here were refugees after World War II. And we were all sent to various camps, which they had in those days in the 1950s. You were sent either to Silver City or to a camp in Bathurst. My cousin Michael was sent to a camp in Bathurst, and we were sent to Bunagilla. And then after some years there, several years there, my parents lived there for 7 years. They met there, married there, and then lived there for a while. We came up to Sydney, and I had a typical kind of Catholic education that a lot of migrant kids had, where I went to school, I couldn't speak English, wouldn't believe it.
I can relate to that.
I couldn't speak English. I just sat there in the class. I learnt, I think the first word, I'm sorry to say, I learnt was pie. And then I learnt something like a cream bun, because I was very, food oriented, and I thought that's great, learning all these great foods. And then my grandmother came out from Poland and minded me, so she refused to speak English because she said that she thought, this is a very devout woman, she said that she thought the devil had invented the English language.
Okay.
And she wasn't going to have anything to do with it. I think she'd just attended some bad classes. But anyway, I went to a Catholic school, some Bridgets, and then some Bridgets in Coogee, then some Bridgets in Marrickville, then I went to Brigidine, and basically it was in the era before everything went a bit off beam, and you had that sort of revolution that was happening, and that's why I was kind of moved to write about those days which were being forgotten, just on the edge of the precipice, just the edge of everything changing. We used to sing Gregorian chant, we used to sing, this and that. We knew our catechism, we had to say it off by heart and so on. And then by the end of my stay in school, I went to uni, first year, about 1970, and I studied to become a teacher because I had no idea what you really did when you went to uni.
Of course,
I thought, everybody did a Bachelor of Arts, so I thought, well, I'll do a Bachelor of Arts, and then I became a teacher. But I liked teaching, it was fine, but I liked the welfare area even more. And what happened was I taught for about 12 years, and then I ended up changing to become what we call educational psychologist.
Okay.
It was a very, very time-consuming. It took a long time to get registered and qualified, and because I became registered in the state system, I was supposed to go out and work in the state system as a school counsellor. So I had to do that. I couldn't find a Catholic place at that time to go and work at. So I ended up working in the state system for many years, but that was good because I saw a lot of the historic era and how it changed. And so that's how I ended up working for over 30 years in the state system of education as an educational psychologist. And I worked in Family Life International, a pro-life group, and ended up doing some work there to help people with various problems, and also other Catholic organisations. And then I ended up writing on psychology for Father Stenhouse for Annals, and then doing some extra sorts of things because Catholic psychologists were a bit thin on the ground then. Not now. We've got some marvellous Catholic psychologists coming up through the ranks, and if you look at St. Raphael's network, they have a lot there. Yes, I kind of ended up being asked to write a chapter in a book
We'll have a look at that.
Yeah, it's this is a book that's used at the American Catholic University, and they asked me, it's a textbook for medical students, and I was asked to kind of write a chapter in it so that they would know how a Catholic would approach various issues. Because I was always interested from the beginning of my studies in the spiritual side, the psychological, the spiritual balance that we need. And I realised that was what was greatly missing in a lot of people's lives.
No, that's good. Thank you for telling us. And also, a lot of our viewers may not know the terminology. I'll just read from here. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who can prescribe medication and treat complex illnesses.
And has done a medical degree.
Correct. And a psychologist is not a medical doctor, but specialises in therapy and counselling.
Therapy and counselling, yes, that's if they're a therapist and counsellor.
Sure.
But you can be a forensic psychologist, for example, where you're trying to, or criminal psychologist, or cognitive psychologist, or interested in neurology. You might be there are many different branches of psychology if you want to go to. One of the most popular ones is, to go and study neurology, or to study how the brain works. But I ended up in this therapeutic area, and they're also with educational psychology, and they're all specialisations.
Yes.
But interestingly, in the early years of psychology, like I'm talking about early modern psychology, about in the late 19th century, there are a lot of Catholics involved, people whose names maybe our listeners have not heard of, Father Edward Aloysius Pace, Father Werner Moore. These were priests who were psychologists. There was Father Frerbs, Father Agostino Gemelli. I could, name you probably 20 different ones who were staunch Catholics. Even a Pole called Kazimierz Twardowski, very, very renowned psychologist and philosopher he was. But the thing is that they had no problem balancing their spiritual background with the new empirical, more scientifically based psychology. And in fact, many of them were medical doctors as well as being psychologists. Now that's an interesting change from now, because now we've specialised, we've said medical doctors and psychiatrists are one thing and psychologists are another thing. So that's a very interesting subject to take up if anybody wants to do a study of it, to say why did that break occur and should it have occurred.
I wanted to ask also, did your faith shape you to pursue psychology? And not only that, did you find there were contradictions? Of course, the faith teaches one way and psychology teaches another. Did you find there was a clash when you went to uni that didn't, get your point of view, didn't match what they were teaching? Did you find there was a conflict when you were studying or along the way?
It's an interesting question. I have to take into account the era, and then I have to take into account how you look at psychology. So let me say, I think the era in which we lived, there was a great admiration for psychology, and people hadn't gotten over the humanistic psychology kind of adulation. Not to mention that people were still into behavioural psychology and so on. And at the same time, Freudian psychodynamic psychology was very much in the vogue. I went to a uni that didn't particularly like Freud. I did my studies at New South Wales and Macquarie University, and they were very much into cognitive psychology. They were very much into empirical psychology. Every essay you wrote had to be an empirical study. So, for example, I know this sounds weird, but it's true.
Sure.
I had to do an essay in my third year of psychology on how children acquire language. Now, that actually interests me. Psycholinguistics, it's called. And I had to do a psychological study, like an empirical study of how children acquire the passive voice in English. And I studied the children at the age of 5, 6 and 7, and then I had to write up my conclusions. But I had to actually interview children, I had to actually do the studies for it and find out how they did it. Another example of an empirical study I did when I was at Macquarie doing the masters was I studied children and sadness. And I had to interview about 150 students. agree on what the word sadness meant to them, then agree on what they do when they feel sad. It was really one of these coping with life studies. This is even before Martin Seligman came on the scene.
Okay.
Martin Seligman was the great person when you talk about how people cope with sadness, how they cope with stress, how they cope with life journeys. And so basically that's the way I had to study psychology. But I knew there was something missing. I knew it all along. I mean, if I heard somebody say something strange, I'd just kind of go and just file it away and think, but I'll just keep thinking what I think. And basically, I knew that when I was pronounced a psychologist, there was something missing, and that was the history of psychology itself. Like, we weren't given any history.
Okay.
How can you study the person without doing a study of the human person?
Sure.
As a philosophically, it's a theologically important basis of the Western legacy. So it wasn't until afterwards, I've been kind of working in psychology probably for about 10 years, that I came across both the Thomistic Institute, and I started to gobble up a lot of philosophy, which I had missed out on, I think, in my psychology degree. And then I found out about the wonderful John Paul II Institute.
Yeah.
And I went and did courses there with great interest. And I remember it was asking the questions that the psychology degrees didn't ask.
No.
And it filled in that side that, every Catholic psychologist, I think, would do well to study the human person, because you can't do psychology without having an understanding of the human person. So that's what I did, and I went to the John Paul II, and that's how I got interested in Paul Witz. If you forgive me putting, Paul Witz is the American psychologist who really had a balance of psychology and his faith. He was one of the first. He wrote a critique of humanistic psychology in 1977. And basically converted to become a Catholic, and then ended up at a teaching course in religion and psychology at New York State Uni, and then he ended up going to what we call the Institute for the Psychological Sciences, which was in Virginia, but now it's called the Divine Mercy University. So it's long answer to a short question.
No, that's
sorry.
good. No, that's good. You told us about it. We appreciate that. And Doctor, I wanted to ask you, our viewers who may be watching this, who are thinking about going seeing a psychologist, is there an age limit? Can anyone go see a psychologist? Do you need to be in a certain way to go see there, or you can just go, like when you're sick, you go see a regular general doctor there? Do you need to be in a certain way can anyone go?
Okay. Now the thing is, I mean, if you've got a major, say, psychotic disorder or something like that, there is a lot of material, a lot of research in psychology that is actually very valid, whether you're a Catholic or not. People have done studies of the brain, of psychotic diseases, of many other types of diseases. So, sometimes it's not appropriate to say, somebody's got schizophrenia, but I want to go to only a Catholic psychologist. It doesn't always work that way. Somebody might be an expert in schizophrenia, not be a Catholic, and do a do a wonderful job. Where people go asking for Catholic psychologists is often when there's a question of, let's say, meaning of life questions. You might have somebody who's depressed. That may be because of some particular way they view the world. So in issues of, let's say, psychological diseases, and in issues of measurement of cognitive ability, they're areas where religion doesn't particularly come into focus. But when you've got counselling and unhappiness and meaning of life questions, and you've got the teleological questions, and you've got all the ideas of, what are you doing this with? I believe, as with Viktor Frankl, who was the post-World War II psychologist, he'd been in a concentration camp and survived and lost all his family. But he said after World War II there was a meaning of life question. Everybody just went, you know, it was like almost on steroids into progress and fun and this and that and that's. And he said when he interviewed a lot of students, not only students, just various young people who had attempted suicide, he did a study. And when he asked them, what was the problem? He said, do you have families? They said, yes. Have you got money? Yes. Are you able to do studies? Yes. Are you able to do other things? You've got friends? You've got, yes. So what was the problem? Why? And they'd say, because nothing has any meaning.
Okay.
And that word meaning came up, and that's why he became the psychologist par excellence, talking about meaning in the 20th century. And he said the crisis we have is a crisis of a lack of meaning.
Yeah. Why am I here?
And if the young people can't perceive it, it's probably, you know, well, it's because that we're not really giving enough sense of perspective or aim in life in that way. But I have always in psychology been very interested in resilience, because I'm interested in the way people survive terrible experiences. You know, and in my 30 years working with children, I came across children who had survived the most terrible experiences. You know, abuse. That's you know, they'd suffered. One child saw the father try to murder the mother, and that child, when I spoke to her, I kept thinking, how can she have survived this? I mean, yes, she needed talking about it. Yes, she needed to have therapy, but this child survived it. And she just had this idea that, you know, she had to be strong and help her mother. Her mother actually survived this attempt to murder her.
That's,
and at the moment that the father shot the gun, the mother was pregnant. And the girl who saw it was only about 10 years, she was only about 10 years old at the time. And she said to me, all I could think of was, God, please help that baby. Now, this is a kid in a state school.
Really? Okay.
And she said, dear God, please help that baby. And the baby survived.
God bless her.
Mother survived. But, you know, after speaking about this horrendous problem, the issue was not, well, the issue she came to me about was not about that. She came to me to ask me, should she visit her father in jail? Anyway, that was interesting. It was many, many years ago that happened. And she ended up together. We talked about it, and she ended up going to visit him in jail. And
what a beautiful, caring child that still, after all this has happened, still be thinking of others, you know, especially seeing that and hearing that. That's amazing. And that's something that child wasn't taught, just internally.
That's right. Had never been to anywhere but a state school. No catechism, no religion classes, nothing.
Yeah.
Another young boy, he actually came from a uniting family background, and he said to me one day, because he'd been a naughty boy, and I said, look, you know, why are you being a naughty boy? You know, why not just calm down and, you know, enjoy the class? And he just was a bit offhand, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a tough nut to crack, you know, like he's just not going to. But no, but then he said to me, hey, miss, have you ever seen this wonderful movie called The Passion of the Christ? I said, no, this is in the middle of a state school with he'd had no catechetics classes, but he did come from a background, very, very difficult background, where there had been deaths from drugs and so on.
Sure.
And he'd been taken by an auntie to some uniting church classes and pizza nights, and he told me that if I hadn't seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, that I should see it. He was teaching me, which I thought was a good thing. I like to get the children telling me, you know. I said, that's so interesting. Tell me, what do you think? He said, well, he said, there's going to be, we're going to do a play. There's going to be a play where Jesus carries the cross. And he said, and they picked me as Jesus.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And he's about 8 years old.
God bless him.
And then he looks at me and he says, when they put the cross on my shoulders, he said, I started to feel a little bit how Jesus felt.
Carrying the
I
weight of the
thought,
world.
8-year-old child, I thought I'm just going to start crying soon and walk out of the room, because I
That's
can't.
nice.
To hear a child
Yeah.
who's had so little start in life. But
Yeah.
my point in all of this is to say, okay, we have children who are abused, we have children who need help, but we also have children who survive, and that's always been my interest in, adults who survive
Yeah.
these things and somehow continue with life. And resilience is a big subject nowadays, because I don't know if your listeners realise, but if when the humanistic psychology fad was around and everybody was saying the me generation, and I've got to do everything to please me, and so on, that they thought that if they did everything to please themselves and got self-esteem, and that was the big thing, self-esteem, self-fulfillment, if they could do that, they'd be happy. But in fact, that coincided with the large increases in depression rates and increases in suicide rates. That was interesting. Of course, correlation is one thing, causation is another. But the thing is that why did all this happen at that time? And what happened was, after all the self-esteem classes, when I came out of uni, I had to take all these self-esteem classes, but then there was a shift. And the shift came because of the psychologist called Martin Seligman, who came in and said, I think we're harming children by talking about self-esteem, and we're not talking to them about the tragedies that inevitably fill life. There are sadnesses and tragedies in life. And he said, I think we need to be focusing on what helps you survive. And that's where all the research dollars now have gone into resilience, and studying that. And he actually came out to Australia. He did a whole course down somewhere in Melbourne, and his books are used widely. And he's not in particular a religious person, or he doesn't admit to one, but he said once, and I heard him give a speech when he came to Australia, he said that the people who seem to survive the best are those who have a meaning in life. Now, people were willing to hear that, but they weren't willing to kind of acknowledge that meaning could mean a religious meaning. That, that actually could help people in their lives. So that was quite interesting. I heard people stand up and challenge him on that. But anyway.
And Doctor, I want to ask you, regarding this book here with Paul Vitz, your book that you wrote, Psychology Mythbusters, as you were saying before about the me culture, in the sense that we are the society that it's all about me, I do what I want, when I want, and I don't care about anyone else. Do you find that it's happening more nowadays? And what Catholic point of view or steps should we do to try to counter that or help people who are going from the me culture rather than helping others?
Yeah, I think we do have a me culture, because we have so many things that draw us into ourselves now, like our mobile phones and our, and the digital world and computers. When I started counselling, there was no such thing as internet addiction. Now we all study it and we're trying to help children with it, because to be involved in games and all these things that are happening, and sad to say, porn and all of that has hit people, we need new types of counsellors, and we've got marvellous new Catholic counsellors, and some Protestants who have joined them, and they're working really well in that area. But yes, there is, I'd say, not only a me generation, but there's also something almost like a combination between narcissism and attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
It's like we just want something for a few minutes and that's it. And I think it affects all of us. I think that, we all have this thing of, we want to get the message quickly, and then put it down and
but not actually put the work involved. You need the work to get to the answer, but no one wants to wait for the answer and then move on.
Or to read silently, to read in quiet. And I find it a bit sinister, really, because you're talking about the interiority of a person. Now, when I was at school, we had time to gaze at the sky, sit in the playground, be bored, you know, do this, do that. I mean, yeah, we had all our subjects, but you had time to actually breathe in and breathe out without thinking, oh, what's the next message on my phone? You know, like that was unknown. So I basically grew up with this ability to just think and reflect and wonder about things, and I think it was a good thing. You know, we had to be very silent in church. The renowned Mother Paschal from St. Bridget's Church in Coogee, you know, she insisted that we weren't allowed to say even a word.
Okay.
And so you had this phenomenon of some kids, including me, nearly fainting sometimes because you were too scared to say a word to anybody. And, you know, your schoolmates saying, you can be strong, you know, you'll survive it, and so on. But no, but the idea was reverence. Reverence, you're in the house of God, reverence.
Yes.
And, but that interiority is being attacked. It's being assailed by many, many things. And the mobile phone probably is the most, you know, the most obvious one of that, because if you're constantly on call, if you're constantly there, you know, there's no time in which you can really say that you can really stretch out and go somewhere. I'm going to go up to, actually, in about 2 months' time, I'm going up to Marion Valley and going to spend a week there and just sort of sit there and look at the sky and look at the stars and, you know, just...
and be with your
but
own
I'm
thoughts.
sure they've got mobile phones and computers there, but I'll just use them less, you know, and not... I'll just try to, you know, go off as much as I can, because nowadays you try to tell people go off them and it's sort of like, you know, you're telling them to switch their heartbeat off or something.
I mean, especially with social media, AI and technology, I mean, it's got its good purposes. Like at the moment, right now, we're filming this. This is going to be out on social media. So there's positive things where you can learn, but as you're saying, the negative parts are that people are going to be addicted to it. They can't switch off. They can't, you know, appreciate nature, family, mum and dad, can't appreciate God as well. So those things are hard. So yeah, it's good, I guess, in a way, if people could just, you know, time limit or limit their time to a certain amount of study, technology and family, as opposed to technology all day. That's probably the worst thing you can do.
That's right. Very, very true. And also to have like some laughter sometimes, you know, like I find that children who are in families where the families laugh and do silly things sometimes, and they're the ones who have some kind of an ability to just enjoy the, you know, watching things and observing and things. But at the same time, I don't believe it's good to be a Luddite. You know, a Luddite is somebody who rejects all technology.
Okay.
But because I do believe we need to kind of assess it and see what's there. I mean, after all, the popes, you know, in the last few years, they've been using technology.
They're on Instagram, they're on YouTube. Yep.
Yeah, there's all sorts of. But you know, as the Catholic Church always has this method of distinguishing the good use from the overuse, or you know, the moderation from the excess, and I think that's what we need to teach children. So when some parents were asking me, what should we do with the computers? Should we just switch them off? And I said, that's the worst thing to do. I said, what you do is you teach how to stop. It's not the switch on button.
Yeah.
It's the switch off button. That should be the aim. So you teach a child, like if they have to do their homework and let's say they have to look something up, and whether it's half an hour or an hour, give them a reward for switching it off.
Yeah.
And tell them. You'll give them, and say that it's made you happy, even if they didn't realise the benefit of it, but that, you know, that you want them to be able to say, no, this is the end. And it's with a lot of things, you know, and a lot of things in life that we have to kind of just say that's the limit, you know, we can't overdo it. But I think a lot of people think it's an all or nothing question. It's not.
Yeah.
And that brings me to say that one of the most difficult things I think in life is coming across difficult personalities and coming across people who are all or nothing thinkers, who can't listen, don't want to converse. Yeah.
It's my way or the highway. Simple as that.
That's it, you know. Somebody can, like, I know that it's very hard. I mean, now I'm, you know, I'm meeting a lot of people in different religious contexts, and yeah, some of them have suffered from, personalities where it's my way or the highway, and if you don't do it, or if you
that's not
don't
good.
do this and this and this and this, you're going to go to hell, and so on. And to speak like that, no,
You should be able to talk to everyone about anything within moderation, but also accept the criticism or the feedback as well. But don't take it personally. But don't say it's, as you were saying, my way, the highway, so to speak. Yeah,
that's it. And they say a sign of real humility and maturity is if somebody tells you you've made a mistake and you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that."
I've done that.
say it without sort of saying, without getting your shackles up and saying, I'm not wrong, you're wrong.
That's right.
And so on. But and those things, the church has got a great legacy in, a great wealth of information. I have been very influenced by the works of St. Francis de Sales, and Introduction to the Devout Life, and St. Teresa of Avila, and love reading her work and how humble she was in approaching a lot of things. And with St. Francis de Sales, the way he looked under the surface and said what seems to might be good on the surface may not be good, you have to really think about it. Those sorts of things we can all benefit from, just doing some of the good old spiritual reading. But I think that for a lot of people, the pressure of the modern world and the addictions, or the overuse of the internet is generating a kind of an unhappiness and a kind of exhaustion and a kind of a burnout at times, that people don't know what to do with, and it's very hard to know how to balance it. That's why the priests are always suggesting to us, pray to the Holy Spirit, for the balance of what you have to do in your life.
Do they have a routine? I know with myself, I try to do the Angelus 3 times a day. I try to do the rosary, have a routine, especially of prayer and hope, and as you were saying, inviting the Holy Spirit into your life to try and help you and guide you. That's also good.
Well, this is it. I think to develop your spiritual life and to be able to speak to the people you're going to be spending eternity with, it's very important. And I think that young children are very open to that. If you really teach them, yes. And I think the routine, it depends on what your duties are in life, but for some people it's just the morning prayer, evening prayer, rosary, and the Chaplet of Divine Mercy and the Angelus as often as they can say it, and then spiritual reading or read the scriptures or something. But it depends on what times, works best for you.
Of course.
If I start to do these things in the evening, I start to doze off. So, it's better in the morning when I've got a few marbles working in that way.
And Dr. Wanda, I wanted to touch on Divine Mercy. A little while ago, you did a talk on it, and I've actually got that talk on my YouTube channel, Divine Mercy. But I just wanted to touch on that there. You actually went overseas to Poland. You actually met the nun who actually knew Saint Faustina. Is that correct? Can you just tell us a little about your journey of going there and what you actually conversed and said to her? Because I think it was towards the end of this particular nun's life that you actually met her. Is that correct? Or?
That's correct, yeah. I went in 2005 for the first time to Krakow, to Łagiewnicki. Now, I'd heard of the Divine Mercy before, but I'm ashamed to say it didn't really grab me. I thought, oh, look, all these devotions. But then it kind of grew on me and I started to get interested, and the picture and the rays of light and so on. And then I went to Poland, and a Polish lady who lives not far from me here, she said, go and ask to see Sister Beata. But she never really told me a lot about who Sister Beata was. So when I go to Krakow and I enroll in the guest house, and then I go up to a young nun and say, hello, sister, I just wondered if I could see Sister Beata. She looked at me like, no way. She's 95 and so on. And I said, I didn't realise. And she, and I said, I just knew that she had known Sister Faustina. And they said, we'll ask her. And I said, well, just tell them Jolanta said that I should ask and has a present for her. So I gave a book. And the next thing, the nun came down with very surprised eyes saying, she said she'd like to see you. Sort of like,
Praise God.
So I met this friend of Sister Faustina, I think the last one who was left alive, in Krakow, we had a 2-hour conversation.
That's amazing.
Luckily, I can speak Polish because of my father and my grandmother who thought English was the devil's language and only spoke Polish. And so she spoke to me, a rather short figure. She was very, very warm. You know, you really understood the word mercy when you were with her. She'd obviously learnt how to just convey this warmth and some kind of joy. Anyway, I was talking, she told me about St. Faustina, told me incredible stories. She said, look, I knew when I first met her there was something special about her, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But she'd be out in the garden and she loved nature. She just loved everything to do with nature. And she said, and before she died, people had got the idea that she was a special person. They were asking for, you know, her prayers, and people would be healed. And then when she died, they prayed already through her intercession, and people did have healings.
Yes.
I heard, and she told me that when she died, there was a very strange thing that happened, that in 1938 they still used horses in Poland, because they were about 10 kilometres, I think it is, from Krakow station, so you'd have to go to the station by horse and cart, and one of their horses died. That's a big thing. If you're in a Polish convent in 1938 and your horse dies, you're going to have to pay a lot of money to get another one.
You can't go anywhere, you can't do any work without a horse.
That's it. And so basically, St. Faustina dies, and then the horse dies at the same time. This is what Sister Beata told me.
Okay,
right? This is the story. And she said the horse was pronounced dead by the vet, and so on, and everybody's more focused on St. Faustina.
Yes.
You know, our beloved, you know, our sister has died, and what happened? Yeah, there was a nun who was collecting some of the sheets off St. Faustina's bed, thinking, you know what, in the future, these are going to be really valuable relics.
Relics, yeah.
And so she thought, well, I'll just get a few sheets while everybody's taking the body and so on. And she put it she put it in her room. Not meaning anything wrong, but she just thought, put them in the room for a while and see what we can do with these, you know, future relics. Anyway, what happened? In the middle of the night, she got an idea. And Sister Beata tells me, this nun thought, maybe I can use these relics on the horse. And so she got the sheets, went down in the dead of night, went into the stable where the horse was, and she flung the sheet over the horse, and the horse came back to life. Just like that in one instant. And the sister sort of gave a bit of a yell. The horse was quite, you know, audible. And she came in, and the nuns started to wake up and say, what's going on down there? Yeah. And she said, oh, and then she told the story, I took these sheets down and I put them on and the horse has come to life. So, look, that's a story from Sister Beata. I didn't invent this one, nothing like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and she said there were other stories that a bit like Padre Pio's life, you know, so many miraculous things happening in and around her life. Like once she was praying, it was a big storm. She was wondering what to, you know, do to make the storm stop because it looked a bit dangerous, and she started to say the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, and the storm just died down. Yeah. So, but Saint Faustina first saw Jesus not in Krakow, but she saw him first in a town called Płock. It's about 2 hours north of Warsaw, and she just went into her room at night after a day's work. And basically saw Jesus walk through the wall. And that was it. And if you ever go to Poland and you go to Warsaw, try to get to Płock as well. Beautiful convent there now. They got it back from the communists because the communists took it at one stage, but they've got it back, and they've got nuns there, they've got guest rooms there. You can stay in the guest rooms and pray in the chapel and so on. But that's the town that Jesus chose to first appear to her as the Divine Mercy. And then after 2 years there, she went back to Warsaw, then she went to Krakow, and then that's where she took her final vows. And then she ends up in Vilnius. And of course, we know the story there, that spoke to a priest called Father Sopochko.
Mm.
He was a confessor, and I happen to have a little card here with a relic of Father Sopochko,
Yes.
you know, her confessor. And he got the painter who hadn't painted any religious paintings before.
It's this one here, isn't it?
That's the first one. That's the one he did. Yes, that's the original painting of the Divine Mercy, and it was meant to show Jesus coming from the darkness into the light, and then his hand is not very high up, and he basically explained what the red and white were. The white was the water of baptism. The red is the life within us through the Eucharist. And then notice he's wearing white, the white robe. And people wondered and they speculated. And some Polish theologians thought it's really like he's the healer. He's coming as a divine healer. Some people get upset. They say, we've got the Sacred Heart picture. Why do we need the Divine Mercy picture? The Sacred Heart and the Divine Mercy are united.
The one.
I mean, the Sacred Heart is pointing at the sacredness of Jesus' heart. Here, he's walking forward as a healer to come and heal you. You know, because if we didn't need healing in the last century,
We do.
people then haven't noticed what went on. I mean, you know, I just heard you know, we've got people who are suffering from so many things, and basically a lot of people are traumatized, who are depressed, and we need to be able to give some hope. But it's interesting, I was just thinking about this the other day, that another interesting fact about the Divine Mercy, that it was at the time when people were trying to deny Christ and put him down.
Okay.
Well, you know, you had Jesus, the historical Christ. And then later on you had Jesus, the New Age Christ.
Yeah, that's right.
Then you had Jesus, who was the nice social worker.
Yeah.
And then you had all sorts of different depictions of Christ that were reducing his divinity.
Yes.
And slap bang in the middle of that, in 1931, bang, you get this appearance. And the picture started to be reproduced in the 1930s. So a lot of people had them in World War II.
Oh, good.
I believe that they started to smuggle out some of these pictures, and some of them got to Australia. But as we know, there was a ban put on her writings because they had been improperly translated, inaccurately translated. In 1959 the ban came on, and that stayed for nearly 20 years. And of course the American Marians of the Immaculate Conception took over the publication, because they had the work had been smuggled out by one of their priests, Father Serafin Mikolenko.
Yeah, that's great.
He smuggled himself into Poland and then took lots of microfiche pictures of the diary, of the original diary.
Yes.
And then brought it out there, got a good translation, and by the early 1980s it had been published in Polish and then in English and then in another 25 languages or more. So it's one of the most bought and published and read books in the world. It's going to be on a par, I think, with The Imitation of Christ.
Yes.
You know, like it's going to be one of these great mystical spiritual works. People say often, oh, can't read it, it's so heavy, but you don't have to read it like an Agatha Christie. You just read a bit of it, reflect on it, you know, and it's you know, but she experienced this. She experienced
hell as well, didn't she? Because I've actually got the diary at home. I've read it, but what she went through was amazing.
She did, and what a lot of people may not know too is that her spiritual advisor, she had two. One was Father Ondrash, who was the first one, and then the second was this Father Sopochko. Now, Father Sopochko is a blessed. Father Ondrash is now a servant of God. So we're looking for miracles with him. And basically, they were trying to kind of make sense of her work, and they were keeping notes. And Father Ondrash wrote actually the first kind of collection of thoughts and reflections in 1947.
Okay.
But with Father Blessed Sopochko, now Blessed Sopochko, he kept his own diary. So there's Faustina writing hers, and there's Blessed Sopochko keeping his diary. And The only publication of it is a kind of a selection of his thoughts, and I got it from a Divine Mercy Centre in Ireland. They had it there, but very well worth reading, because he then comes to understand that we don't understand what mercy is.
Yeah.
He said he thought he understood it, he thought he knew it all, but he said from this nun who'd had 3 years education, and he started to kind of read what she wrote, and he thought, how on earth could she come up with those thoughts?
It has to be divine. Yep.
Yeah, it had to come from somewhere, and he realised that this was the era in salvation history. This was the opportune moment for us to deepen our knowledge of mercy itself and of the divine mercy.
Yep.
And it was the opportune moment in which we're to consider Jesus in the divine mercy, Sacred Heart and divine mercy. So yes, it was everything seems to happen at its opportune time in salvation history. You know, the resurrection happened at a certain moment, and we'd had thousands of years before then, and now, you know, we've got this first saint of the new millennium, Saint Faustina.
And there's also, Dr. Wanda, another saint that came out of this, Pope John Paul. He actually went, and if I could be wrong, if I could recall your talk, that he actually went to the same place where Saint Faustina went, and actually, obviously as a young priest, he wasn't a pope then, but that was, it's coincidence that she was there and he was there, and he later became a pope, and now he's a saint.
Yeah, well, there she was near Krakow, and he was in Krakow. He was going to go to uni, and then of course she dies in 1938. And he actually came there probably about that time, but he had to go and do slave, well, you know, like he had forced labour.
Manual labour, sort of.
Manual labour. And he would walk past the convent, and he heard this story about this nun, and he thought, wow,
interesting.
You know, let's go inside and, you know, check it out, and let's pray. So he would go in and pray, and she was buried outside, I think, first, and then her body was brought inside. But he prayed to her, and I always have this little bit of a fantasy in my mind where I think, look, they were all living and working at the same time. I mean, you think of it, Saint Faustina, Karol Wojtyła, and Saint Maximilian Kolbe, all around the same time. They're probably all passing each other at the station or something, you know. But I keep thinking maybe in Krakow, about Saint Faustina and the future Pope passed each other, and they might have bumped into each other and said, "Oh, terribly sorry," you know, and just walked on. But look, that's just me and my imagination. But I'll say one thing: if there is a film director out there who has the ability and the means to do it, I think writing the story of how her materials escaped from the communists and came out to the West would make it a kind of a really
film.
good still Steven Spielberg movie. You know?
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good.
Yes.
So if anyone hears this, that's a first plug. That's an idea right there, coming from down under here in Australia. That's a good idea. No, really, I agree with that.
We need a good film director to do it. You know, like it's like, for example, when Father Sopochko asked this priest to take the materials to America, it was in 1940. He knew that if the communists got hold of it, they might destroy it. Now, he wasn't talking about the diary. The diary was hidden, but he's talking about all the things that had been written about it. He'd written to the Vatican, he'd written studies on it, there were other writings about it. They fitted into 2 plastic bags. And there was a priest called Father Jarzembowski. I know Poles always have hard to pronounce names, but Father Jarzembowski. And he got onto a train, and on every carriage of that train there was a member of the NKVD, which was the precursor of the KGB.
Okay.
And in every carriage. And they asked him about these bags that he had.
What's there?
Yeah, and every time he seemed to get away with it. He got away with it, and he goes all the way across Siberia, all the way across Russia, and then ends up at Vladivostok, the easternmost point. And what he had to do then was get a visa to get to Japan, which he didn't have. And of course he goes to the Japanese consulate, once he's got off the train and he knocks on the door and they say, we're closed. And he said, no, please, I urgently need a visa. We're closed. And he gets the Divine Mercy card out and he starts to say the chaplain. Somebody comes to the door, says, what was it you wanted?
Amazing. Praise God.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And he says, look, I need a visa to get to Japan. I'm on my way to America. And they got him in, and the guy who gave him the visa is a Jewish consul lawyer.
Okay.
And he wrote it out for him.
That's amazing.
Yes, and so he gets to Japan and then he gets to America. And he said that if he made it to America, he would devote his life to Divine Mercy, because it was really touch and go whether he would get there. I mean, he got there in 1941, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, so it was a very, very dangerous journey. He got there, and a lot of the members of his order were being killed in Poland. The Marians of the Immaculate Conception, a lot of martyrdom there.
One of the most famous, especially nowadays, social media, is Father Chris Aylar.
Oh, yes.
He's quite well known. He does a lot of the Marian talks. And,
that's right.
I watch a lot of those. He's quite good. But yeah, you're right. If it wasn't for that Father bringing that to America, we wouldn't have the concept of it nowadays.
That's right. And Father Chris Aylar is very excited about the story too. I actually met him briefly when he came to Sydney last year in July. It was sort of like, it's very interesting to see people who come to see a present fill up St Mary's Cathedral. It's almost like the spiritual version of Elvis, everybody was there waiting in a queue and everybody wanted to get their book signed and so on. I was among them, and I got my book signed. We had a bit of a chat, and I just said how wonderful it was. I like his clarity.
Yes.
People may disagree or not agree about a point, but if you know what you're talking about and somebody says it clearly, at least you know what the discussion is about. And his big theme has been all along that he was never given this at school. Yeah, he said he never heard all these truths of the Catholic faith till he went to the seminary.
That's true.
And he almost didn't get to the seminary because he thought, should he really become a priest? He was an engineer, but he got into the seminary and he took such meticulous notes. He said that people started to wonder if they're kind of trying to keep tabs on the teachers or something, but he said, no, I just want to preserve this. I want to keep it because they're so good.
It's available.
What I'm learning. And so what he shares online, when you hear his talks, that's from his seminary notes most of the time. He said, I went to my seminary notes and I got them out because I want to share them with all of you. Yeah. So I think that's very kind.
Yeah, he's well worth watching, Father Chris Aylar. If you get a chance to see him, type it in YouTube or in Google, but his talks are well worth seeing. And I want to ask also, just a final question. This is probably a hard question to ask, Dr. Wanda. Who is your favourite saint? Because there's so many there, so...
Oh, look,
so many.
There's so many, and I don't know that I could really say one. I like many other people, have a little committee, and I must say Saint Faustina, Saint Agnes, because that's my confirmation name. Okay. And I've always liked her from childhood, and Saint Rita.
Saint Rita, yep.
The Saint of the Impossible. Saint Teresa of Lisieux, of course. And then I do like Sister, or she's not a saint actually, just a sister that I very much am taken by because she just seems to have been such a meek, humble person. That's Sister Consolata Bertoni. Okay. She was the one to whom Jesus appeared and said, please teach them to say, Jesus and Mary, I love you, save souls. Okay. And whatever moment of the day you've got, Fred, just keep saying that prayer, with love. But I also... have a great admiration, of course, for St. John Paul II, St. Juan Diego. I like the fact that he tried to avoid going to a Marian apparition because he couldn't believe that he just didn't want to, get involved in it all. It was all too much, and he tried to avoid seeing Our Lady going around the mountain, so she meets him at the other side of the mountain. I just think that's got a... heaven has that sense of humour. Yeah, and look, there are probably many other people that I've left out. I like St. Francis of Assisi and St. Pio. St. Padre Pio, I've got a lot of books about him. And I just think we are so fortunate to have all these books. If you don't particularly like one, go to another one. And St. John Paul II said, if you go to one church and you don't particularly like something that's happening there, then go to another church.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't say go and have a nervous breakdown and just sort of keep screaming until everything's your way. Just, you know, go to Jesus wherever he is, you know, and
he'll meet you where you are, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that we're living in very difficult times now. We have to really take care of our you know, our physical, mental, and spiritual health, and but I don't think we're going to make it through without having strong spiritual, a strong spiritual, you know, life.
Yeah.
You know, and if people can get to Mass as often as they can and say the Rosary and read about some of the, you know, the saints and some of the approved modern visionaries and so on. I mean, it's there's more than enough there. Like, I'm sure people have had this experience. You start talking about it, you end up hours later, and you're still involved talking about it.
Yeah, it's good.
I found that with some friends, and it gives a kind of a joy, and that's the joy of our faith.
Yes.
I mean, one of the saddest things I find is when somebody stands up, or, you know, when you get somebody saying, and now we will read from Psalm, and they'll say, my joy is in the Lord.
There's no emotion in it.
And I think, no.
That's not how you read it. Of course, you need to put your whole soul into it.
That's it. We do have the eternal life to look forward to, and the joy is something, but it's not a false joy. It's a realistically based joy. And in the meantime, we have to reach out, I think, to many, many people who are suffering, who are sad, because of our society losing its spiritual kind of foundations, you know. But I think coming from like a Polish background, East European background at least, I just, I think we're very stubborn, you know. So in Poland, when the communists told Cardinal Wyszynski, you know, they locked him up under house arrest, the first thing he thought of was how to get around it.
Yep.
And what he did was he sent out a missive, and one of the guards, he found out one of them was a bit, you know, friendly, sent out a message saying we're going to do a 9-year novena in Poland to celebrate its 1,000th year anniversary of conversion to Christianity. So that was in the 1950s. So 1966, Poland turned Catholic in 966. So in 1960, they'd done a novena.
Good.
And each year was a novena, and there was nothing the communists could do to stop it.
That's good.
So, and that kind of stubbornness.
Faith of the people.
Yeah, it's a kind of a faithful, holy stubbornness, you know. There, but now one of our big dangers is a kind of indifferentism, you know, because everything's so much easier, fine, comfortable, you know, and
no one's a struggle.
That's it. But if we look at the realities of our world and how children suffer, how people suffer for their faith in Africa, in the Congo, you just talk to the missionary priests, and you know, you'll see, you know, they're the spotlight's on them at the moment, and it's our duty to try to help them in some way, as does Aid to the Church in Need, and as do other organisations and missionaries. But you know, I read a report recently that said that they reckon last year the number of abortions in the world was about 73 million.
That's a lot. That's a huge amount.
I don't know on what that was based. That was from a Protestant, or they claimed a statistic base for it. I don't know if it was an estimate or a base, but even if it's overestimating, but anything around that, we've got terrible rivers of blood around us. You know, we're living in this kind of sadness that we have to help the people who are misled, confused, and I think that's one of the worst things for people to be, is terribly confused about who they are, where they're going, what's their faith, what's their destination.
What's their purpose?
So that's why telling the truth is a great mercy, I think.
And Doctor, just do you have any final words that you want to say to our viewers? Do you have any books coming out or talks or something final that you want to just mention? Anything top of your head or anything?
Well, I just took to writing articles recently about some of these early Catholic psychologists that weren't very well known and aren't very well known, and I'm hoping to get something out on that maybe this year or next year.
That's good.
Just a collection of them, because we should at least know our own history. Psychologists, I'm saying. We should really, if you don't have your own ancestry.com as a psychologist, as a Catholic psychologist, a Christian psychologist, then what do you know? You know, so I felt I'd been robbed when I was at uni, and now I feel as if I discovered a lot about it because of the American publications on it. There were some from maybe 50 years ago, and
You're reading on.
very, very interesting works on these psychologists. Yeah, and there are some very good psychologists now who integrate their work with their faith. And we've got marvellous ones in Sydney. As I said, the Raphael Network, really, if you ever want to get in touch and ask for somebody to give help in any particular area, then just go to the St. Raphael Network and just ask if they can find somebody for you. You know? Yeah, so it's not an impossible search now to find someone. Catholic psychologist.
No, that's good. Appreciate that. And I'll make sure I put in the description underneath the video where you can find your books, Doctor, like this. At least people can get an idea of it if they want more information. But it's always good. At least they know there's hope out there. That no matter what happens in life, there's always hope. God loves you. And there's people and specialists who are out there to help you along, especially resilience, as you were saying. You know, the things are going bad, there's always hope. No matter what, there's always hope.
There's always hope. Yes, you say, you know, and psychologists aren't the only people in the world. I think priests. Yeah. Priests, some of the priests I've come across, how marvellous they are. And it really hit me in Lourdes, when you had the procession at night with the disabled people, and they had their nurses in white, and they're all walking along. And I thought, isn't that nice? And I thought, yeah, we're singing of her. But then happened what really floored me. I saw about 100 priests, and they're all wearing white robes. And I thought, here are the spiritual healers. Yes. These are the spiritual healers, and the greatest mercy, you know, that they listen to us. They try to heal us. They in confession, the great mercy that's given to people. So yes, if people are worried and for whatever reason, please go to a priest in confession. You know, they are very, I think, much more knowledgeable and than a lot of people give them credit for. You know, they're very, very much willing to listen and do that, and you'll find that it helps you. Sometimes people want to go to a priest and to a psychologist, right? For example, in the case of post-abortion syndrome, sometimes women would like to see a priest, of course, and then, or they want to see a psychologist, and the psychologist might recommend go see a priest. And with that double barrel approach, it really works well. There's healing. You've got the spiritual healing, and then you've got the psychological kind of easing of that terrible pain, and the knowledge that God loves that person. No, that's good. I appreciate your time, Dr. Wanda. That's amazing. Thank you for spending time with us and telling us everything. And you know, God bless everything that you do and continue to do. That's amazing. Thank you for that. Oh, well, thank you very much.
No worries, thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
There.
All the